Watch out, let me get a shot. Where they at? Where they at?
On that rooftop. Hey! Give me a fucking 42 in here,
We're east of the riverbed, and we're taking fire from the west. Roger, stand by, we're popping smoke. Gun runs north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke.
Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
Welcome to the Combat Leadership Podcast. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Okay, we're back for part two with Brian Chontosh, U.S. Marine Corps retired. Tosh, lots of good stuff in part one. You shared some superb insights and lessons learned, all aimed at helping those who will face combat somewhere down the line. Really want to thank you for coming back for more discussion.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Been looking forward to this. Apologize for it not being sooner in our timeline, but I think when you produce this, it'll be seamless for everybody. So no worries.
No doubt about it. It'll be 2 episodes and they'll be back to back. They'll both be published in the same week, so people will be able to listen to part one and part two within a couple days of each other. So we covered a lot of topics in part one, Brian. We most notably at the end, we talked at length and you shared a lot of your insights on the topic of discipline. And I know the listeners got a lot out of that from part one. I want to go into a big topic right now, fear and uncertainty. I want to ask you if someone came up, Tosh, and asked you the question that you asked yourself at one point pre-combat, when first bullets go down range, how am I going to act? I'm not afraid of dying necessarily, but I'm definitely afraid of choking and, letting my buddies down. I'm sure you've been asked this question. If some young troop came up to you today and said, look, you've obviously been there, done that, I'm kind of worried about it. I have natural, apprehension. Am I going to be okay? What are you going to tell them?
Yeah, I mean, that's the age-old question, I think, and no matter what or how you try to tell anybody, don't worry about it or think this or think that, it's not going to hold up because it's going to happen. You're going to think about it until first contact, and then you'll know. And I'll tell you, doesn't matter how many combat engagements you face, that question still lingers. Well, how am I gonna respond in the next situation? How am I gonna respond the next set of obstacles or adversities or uncertainties? And it's normal and natural. I think when you tell yourself, if you try to tell yourself not to think about it, don't worry about it, it'll happen, you're fooling yourself, so to speak, it's gonna be on your mind. Now, I'm the kind of guy that it's okay, it's on my mind, I'm going to let it be, that I'm going to acknowledge it. And when you acknowledge it, you kind of take away some of the spooky power of it. It's very similar to boogeyman underneath your bed when you were young. The more you feared it, the more you were hesitant about it or anxious about it, the stronger that reality of the boogeyman was perceived, until you just said, okay, hey, fine, there's a boogeyman under my bed. When he jumps out, I'm going to handle it when he jumps out. And so the focus really is, hey, how am I gonna respond? Well, I'm going to respond honorably, and I'm going to respond to the best I possibly can given the training that I have. And that's all anybody can ask me. I'm going to do my best. That's all I can ask of myself. That's all anybody can expect from me. And whatever shakes out, if you can look at yourself, or anybody can look at you and say, hey man, that dude he just did his best. He did the best he can. And if sometimes that means you freeze or you stutter or you plow ahead recklessly or you're tempered, those things are mildly interesting when it's tempered with, hey, the dude just did his best. He acted honorably and he went hard, gung-ho, the best of his abilities. And I think when you settle into that, obviously the more contact you face, the more that'll be tempered, and you'll gain confidence and wherewithal, and you draw from your experiences, and it's less spooky. But that's got to be the starting point. We asked it of ourselves. Drill instructors asked it of us when we were boot camp. You think you're going to do this, or you think you're going to do that, in combat, you're going to do this. And how are you going to, and it's just pounded into us to have those thoughts in our head, but focus on the things you can control. And that time will come when it comes. And so I'm babbling a little bit because I've just grown and changed since I was 18 years old, 20 years old. My first combat was in Liberia, Africa, where we actually, we traded rounds in low intensity conflict is what it was termed back at the time in the day. And, we were all naive, you pray for war and, I want to have combat, I want to be tested. And it's like, man, I know how foolish and naive that sounds now, looking back 25 years, but it's normal and natural to have those thoughts and think that way. I suppose we're programmed for it, but I think justice needs to be also weighed with, hey, the concentration needs to be on, you're going to act honorably and you're going to do the best that you possibly can. I find a sort of comfort in that. And then you just accept the situation when it comes and as it comes.
Good answers. I've asked this question quite a bit recently of other folks on the podcast, and they're all saying what you're saying, Tosh, and many of them are adding a caveat saying, if you have faith in your training, if you're well trained and well prepared, believe it or not, your training will kick in and you'll find yourself reacting, firing and maneuvering, often without even thinking about it. You may get more scared after it's happening, but you will not freeze. You will react to your training and you'll do okay. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. And let's put an adjective in there and call it good training. There's got to be an understanding from the leadership, like what valuable, realistic training and standards-based training, performance standards-based training that replicates to near reality. And that's what you want to rely upon. I mean, I've been through how many shitty training ops, and training situations, scenarios that are just like, yeah, hey, this is not. And what's neat about current day armed forces is there's a lot of experience now on what good quality training that would be realistic should look like by people anticipating, because we went through an era of we not having a lot of combat, and so drawing from the lessons learned, and I think that's where it's really critical of that strategic corporal, the subordinate, the junior leadership that really make and shake on a battlefield, to have confident senior officers and leadership that empowers these NCOs to have input and say on what training could look like or should look like, so that we can replicate reality as close as possible. And, the importance of our NCOs in our training continuum prior to or during workups prior to deployment they were instrumental. We had NCOs, sergeants and staff sergeants, staff NCOs, running training ops and designing training ops. So, that's an important piece. If you're absolutely going to fall back on training and what muscle memory, immediate actions, well, let's just make sure we're doing them right. We're holding ourselves to a certain standard while we're training those. How many times have we seen, how many times was I part of a squad or a platoon and we're going through training and we're doing it half-assed and we're not really holding anybody to a certain standard, and all you're doing is reinforcing how you're going to behave when the moment arises. And it's like, hey, who was it? Was it Newt Rockney? Was it Vince Lombardi? It's not practice how you play. Or practice makes perfect. It's perfect practice that you need to concentrate on. And it's hard to do. It's very hard to do in a training environment when there's other distractions and it's ho-hum and it's day in and day out. And especially now that we're in I suppose we're in sort of a non-combat phase for most of the forces. And it's like, oh, well, this training doesn't have any purpose. The war's over. We're not even going to deploy. And it's like, hey, you've got to beat that attitude out of your leadership.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also like that you mentioned the strategic corporal. One thing I keep banging on all these podcasts is the the critical nature of platoons and squads, and I think it is boring right now. We've both been through it as enlisted Marines and officers. Times of peacetime, it can get boring as hell. But it really is imperative, especially on those squad leaders and team leaders and section leaders and all of that. They have to really make sure that they are running their folks through those squad rushes and gun drills and all of that really good. I had a interview with a retired Army first sergeant. He was in the regular Army first, then he was in the Ranger battalions, the Ranger regiment for the Battle of Mogadishu. And he said one of the biggest things that shocked him was he came from the regular Army, and he said, I came from a good unit, and then I got with a Ranger company, in a Ranger battalion, and I was shocked at the difference in the standards and the intensity with just something like squad rushes or crossing a danger area. He said, I knew what to do, but with the Rangers, the standard was excellence and intensity every single time. And it was like, we're not waiting for combat. It was like, and he said that the difference was night and day. And he said that he actually did see people respond like that in pretty thick combat in Mogadishu. As you know, they were fighting for their lives for a good long while. So it amplifies what you said previously, Tosh, about good training, quality training. And I'd like to get your thoughts on, a lot of times I think NCOs, staff sergeants, maybe even lieutenants, they look upward and say, well, you're not hooking me up with good training. And I think that my experience was the training at the platoon and squad level can be really good despite slack staff NCOs and officers who haven't really delivered a good package or enabled you all that well. If the people at platoon level and below really have their act together and want to have good training, you can have good training. Thoughts?
Yeah, it comes down to one word. It's professionalism. And, at varying levels, what varying units, whether you're, regular corps or special forces or whatever, you can still implement good practices and procedures, systems and procedures for your training, and open communication between, okay, so a lot of times I'm trying to talk specifics, I guess, as an NCO, you're not aware of some of the constraints and restraints that you have to work with in your training, ammo and training areas and time and all these things. And so it's very easy to get jaded at a certain level when there's a lack of communication about some of those, those constraints and restraints that you have to face when designing training. But if you keep open communication, that allows them to understand and appreciate why we're focused here and we can't do this. This would be so much better. It's like, okay, yeah, I know it would be so much better, but let's practice this first so that when we do have, for like example, live fire. Live ammunition is for validation that your TTPs are nice, dialed in tight. So we shoot no blanks for a while. We do blanks, we do sesams, and it's all building up to make sure that we can dial in some of the basics over and over again and focus on precision and all of that. Beautiful orchestra before we put live ammo in your pocket. And then it's a validation, because it creates a little pucker check. But in a training environment with live ammo, there's a lot of safety limitations for what you can do. And it does, to an extent, artificialize, if that's a word, some of the training that you're going to do. So some of the best training we've ever done was with blanks. But the men, they don't understand that. It's just open communication, some education, empowering corporals. And, I could talk for weeks on training, designing training, and I've got a whole bunch of stuff to share some other day maybe, but you have to create rewards for the training for output. Now I'm talking, hey, we're just straight leg dumb grunts, man. I'm not dealing with super high IQ GT, not no slight to any of us in straight leg, but the special forces draw the best of the best, and we're dealing the best we can with the audience we have. And it's like, I forgot where I was going with that, but you do the best that you can with what you have, but you reinforce with a reward system for maximum effort and perfect practice. These guys need to be motivated because they're not always going to be thinking in terms of professionalism. We've seen it. We've seen that the junior enlisted, the junior officers, they're not really imbued with this higher calling of what it is to be a professional. To them, being in the Marine Corps or whatever service is just an occupation. But you really have to instill that value. And so we just did performance-based rewards. I focused on the punishment. For Sergeant focused on, the icing and the cake. But hey, if you don't want to do it right, we'll just stay here. Cancel the trucks for Sergeant. We'll stay another day. I just make a phone call, and we'll stay on the range another day. And hey, if you do the drills right with full intensity and practicing all the basics and not taking shortcuts, if we're done at the range by noon, we're done at the range by noon. We'll go home. And so there's many techniques for motivating people to get them to do what they need to do. And as a young officer, I was hated by the wives network, man. Moms calling up and, the CO's keeping him in the field too long. And, wives calling up, hey, he needs to get home to see his daughter's birthday. And I'm like, hey, I'm training to a standard. Maybe you tell your husband or your son that if he puts out a little bit more, we'd be done as a unit, So I'm taking it off topic, but something I'm very passionate about with professionalism in training, because when push comes to shove, you're going to fall back on the lowest common denominator of skills that you've rehearsed and practiced, and you don't want it to be anything but top notch.
Right. I want to skip to the next topic, Tosh. One that I think you're very well versed in: mental toughness, the warrior spirit. However that is defined by you, how important is mental toughness in combat, especially on the part of the leader? And can it be developed?
Yeah, it's absolutely developable. It's almost the opposite of the occasion that people are just born with it. You temper steel to make it harder. You endure hardship so that you know how you're going to react to the hardship, and the next time you face a similar hardship, it won't feel so abstract or hard. And you continue to push yourself to be harder and harder, and you have to do it on many different dimensions. But what is mental toughness? It's a kitsch word these days. Grit, resiliency. Everybody's talking about that, and who's defining it? Who's giving you processing? This is what I call it. It's character. It's character given an opportunity to make a choice. That's how you develop mental toughness. It's a situation arises, and we're going to test your character. And you're going to choose A or you're going to choose B. And that's all. That's how you develop mental toughness. Give people's character an opportunity to make choices. And when they make the wrong choice or the weak choice, there's reward. Sometimes it's negative reinforcement, sometimes it's positive. But that's how you build character. That's how you build mental toughness. It's simple as that. It's opportunity to make a choice.
Do you think the example that leaders give off, and in other words, that never quit mentality, do you think that's infectious? Does that bleed over to the rest of the unit?
Yes, it does. Everything that your leader, now I'm not talking about necessarily purely positional leader. I'm talking about those personalities that exhibit some sort of charisma, intellect, talent, skill, that certain, just that energy, that mojo that people follow. Those are your leaders, and your units are going to take on, especially over time, living in tight quarters, spending more time with each other than you are anybody else in this world with your unit. You're going to take on the flavor of the strongest personality. And if that strongest personality is a weak individual, weak in character, your unit is going to draw from that, and they're going to slowly over time, and you don't even realize it as it's happening. You look back 10 years and you say, oh wow, that unit there took on the air of that individual, and that's the way they acted, and that's what they did. So being aware of that. And I don't think you contrive. I don't think you contrive being a certain way or trying to shape a unit a certain way by managing that, because there's different individuals and different units they require. And I mean, my commander needed 3-4 company commanders. My battalion commander needed to have 4 company commanders that were different personalities, different, manners, different mojo. And so that he could have a selection to choose from to employ for any given situation. Yeah. He knew that Commander so-and-so was more equipped to handle this with a certain finesse, and Commander so-and-so, and he knew that the flavor of the unit that he's got direct impression on is going to be the right unit for that solution. And that's an example for battalion commander and company commander, but that goes all the way down. Platoon commanders want to have 3 squad leaders that all are authentic in expressing who they are, because then he knows he's got a choice of 3 squads. And he's like, okay, hey, I'm going to put first squad as the main effort this time, and second squad is the best suited for, supporting effort number 1. And that's how we're going to work this solution, because this scenario requires whatever that's more suited for each flavor. And so go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're right on the money. I'd like you to talk a little bit about a position you've been in, the private and PFC. Personally, I've been in that role, and, looking upward, I drew a lot of strength knowing that I just had a rough, nasty squad leader. And should the occasion arise that we're going to have to go clear rooms, I just knew that this guy was going to be up front. We were going, and he was expecting me to do something, and we just took on, his tenacity. And he wasn't trying to teach us tenacity; he was teaching us tactics and things like that. But the byproduct was he was just such a confident, no bullshit, no quit. We're going, when it comes time to kick doors, we're going to flatten that door. That kind of mentality that the whole squad took it on. And again, not contrived. It just bled over. Any thoughts?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what we talked about on the first segment a lot, or I mentioned over and over, just trust, just having this trusting relationship and this intimacy. And it's founded off authenticity and be who you're going to be. And other squad leaders may not be as tenacious, but there's going to be somebody in that squad who is. And if you have a squad leader that's a little bit more reserved and calculated, but he can employ the tenacious fire team, they're the ones that are going to go up front. And there's no mold of that iconic. I have a problem with that iconic statue out front of O'Bannon Hall and at TBS. It's wonderful, but the whole "follow me," I forgot who the "follow me" statue. Follow me, and I've watched hundreds, thousands of lieutenants try to emulate the whole "follow me" persona and just rush headlong into things and lead from the front aggressively. And that's not what we're really trying to say with that follow me. The whole, as I read the follow me piece, it's more like I will set the example. I want you to follow who I am in terms of being a good human being, being technically and tactically proficient, being authentic, being, mentally tough, physically conditioned. Those things is what the follow me is. Follow my leadership characteristics and traits, my principles that I'm working hard to exude. That's the follow me. And, the be brave in combat and charge the enemy's gun nest, that's fine. And there's a place for that. Yeah. But I find in the operating spectrum that charge the machine gun pillbox of World War II or, jump in the tunnel of Vietnam, those are the absolute exceptions to the norm. Yeah. There's a place for them, but they don't happen on the frequency of do the right thing, Yeah.
It's, well, you're exactly right. I think what you're saying is being mentally tough does not mean necessarily loud, and it doesn't mean that you're so aggressive that you end up running to your death. It's not what we're looking for.
There's a place for it. There's a time for when that needs to happen, and that's but if that's your default, you're already defaulting to the last chapter. And when you have a dozen chapters before that you potentially have at your disposal.
Yeah. So, I think what you're telling the young squad leaders and team leaders listening to this, some of whom aren't even born yet, they're going to be listening to this 20 years from now, Tosh, is, as the squad leader, team leader, platoon sergeant, platoon commander, your job is to quickly figure out, there's other ways. There's got to be other ways then rushing this pillbox or this barricaded guy in a house? How do we outsmart them? How do we flank them? How do we do this? And to your point, there may become a time where it's like there's just no way around. We have to smash now. We have to play smash mouth. But I know personally the Marine Corps has been trying to drive that mentality out of people for a long, long time. You know, the frontal assault used to be our chosen thing in World War II in Korea, and to some extent in Vietnam. And we're out of the stacking friendly bodies game, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I love where you're going with it. The frontal assault, the single envelopment, I mean, those are great. Those are super basics. We need to practice them, and because there's so many intangible things that run parallel to being successful at some of the more other maneuvers and strategies, tactics, they're essential. We have to practice those. But, I mean, we learned our lesson the hard way in Fallujah as a Marine Corps. Stack on me, char, go through the door. And then when you make contact, flood it, just keep flooding it and body. I mean, you look at casualty statistics of units assaulting Fallujah and you ask what the TTP was for any given firefight, battle, whatever, that was generally it. Stack on me, flood the front door, you button hook, I'll cross over, you go firewall, I'll go firewall. They're teaching all that bullshit. And at the same time, we're teaching combined arms and strategy and, this and that. And I'm not slapping myself on the back because I had a phenomenal executive officer and amazing squad leaders. And the only thing I'm going to take credit for was that I listened to them. I had a wherewithal to listen to them. And we just had a battle procedure. We just broke out of all of those basic rudimentary tactics. They weren't suitable for Fallujah. And it was like, why am I sending 4 Marines? Why am I sending 4 dudes in a room when I can send a tank main gun round or 4 grenades? It's like, hey, why stack 4 people on a door? Let's just, all I want my Marines to do is just sniff out and find where the enemy is. We're going to make contact. And then you're going to just isolate, man. And then we're going to isolate that thing. We'll reduce the threat with the biggest Dodic we have. And then we're just going to stack Dodics. We're just going to organize them from the biggest Dodic all the way down. And when we get down to 9 mil, then we're at 9 mil. But I'm shooting main gun rounds. I'm shooting grenades, smalls, already, all of that stuff, all the way down even for one. Why would I send a Marine that I love so much, let alone 4 of them into a room, and then another 4, and then another 4? Because, every time you take a casualty, it takes 3-4 dudes just to try to get a casualty out. And it's more casualties. And we learned our lesson the hard way. A lot of units did in Fallujah by doing that. And that's what we talk about by being a thoughtful, mindful, strategic corporal. And these guys were just like, yeah, sir, like, it doesn't make sense. I'm like, yeah, I'm with you, man. Let's figure out how to solve it. Like, what do you need? Oh, we need more tanks. Okay, well, let's get more tanks. Well, we don't have any more tanks. Okay, well, what's the next best thing? We need more grenades. Okay, cool. I'll give Kilo Company all the 81 millimeter mortars. You can have them since you're so happy to shoot those, and I'll trade them for grenades.
Yeah.
And that's thinking. And that's the officers and that's the staff NCO's job to think based off of the feedback and the information that those corporals, those squad leaders, those sergeants are feeding you. That's your job. And I was just blessed to have amazing ones.
Well, that's I know you're not looking for a pat on the back, but that well done on that. And where I'm going with this, Tosh, is I don't believe you asked anybody permission to do that. In other words, you were trusted to be on the ground and figuring out the best way to employ your Marines and all assets available. And what you did, I think you firmly, if not literally, believe it saved and prevented casualties. There was nothing stopping other commanders to the left and right from doing that. Maybe they just didn't have the idea. But if you're listening to this podcast, folks, it is your job to have an open mind, listen to your NCOs, and figure out another way. Thoughts on Tosh?
Yeah, I was blessed. I was just blessed with amazing chain of command, up and downstream, and open and honest communication and professionalism was was
Yeah.
what ruled everything. And so that was just kind of beaten into us, trained into us, and we became believers of it. And, Pat Malay, set that example for all of us, heading into Fallujah. That's how we were able to adapt and evolve, and that example is just a simple example, and that shouldn't be templated over another situation, but the spirit,
Right.
the spirit of what we're talking about is what needs to carry from situation to situation and unit to unit. And it does not replace do what you're fucking told sometimes. And it does not replace like the value of a sound frontal attack executed exceptionally violent. It's all valid. It's just the spirit of what we're talking about is that that's something that needs to be harnessed and talked about in small leadership circles and practiced,
Well, I got to believe that you putting main gun rounds inside of houses where the bad guys were holed up after they lost several squads, so to speak, I'll bet they adapted their tactics. So you got them out of their game as well, which, you got inside their OODA loop because they weren't used to main gun rounds coming in. Let's face it, when a main gun round goes in those little houses, a lot of times they totally collapse. Everybody in there is pretty much gone. So did you find that you disrupted their battle plan, so to speak, which kind of flushed them out and made them more vulnerable to you?
Yeah, without getting too in the grain of Fallujah specific, because it was horrific. We never let the enemy have a battle plan. Like the best battle plan of the enemies is one that we give them. And so at least in our company, generally our battalion, we didn't allow the enemy to have, of course we had our lanes. So we had to operate within our lanes because we were part of a bigger team, and you have to respect that, there's give and take with the other unit, but given inside of our lane, and even inside the company lanes, it was just, the enemy doesn't have a chance to do it. They're following our rules. And if you're savvy about the employment of your weapons, and it all comes down to technical and tactical proficiency. When you know your systems through and through, and you're really well trained in maneuver warfare and combined arms. What is that? MCDP1 warfighting? Like when you're well versed in that, and again the spirit of what it means, you give the enemy the option to have a battle plan that they think they're creating, but it's already, you've given it to them, so you already know the solution. And that's what we did at the company level. And I would say even at the battalion level, what we were doing. Yeah.
I want to go into a topic that I know is near and dear to your heart personally and professionally, and that is physical conditioning. Probably, in my opinion, one of the most controversial topics in the military, even the Marine Corps, especially in the rear and peacetime and all of that. I think it's units either do it very well or they're PTing like the 1940s still. And I want to get your thoughts on physical conditioning, but I want to load this up front, Tosh. Physical conditioning, in my opinion, in peacetime is to produce a healthy, fit individual who has the endurance to perform his role in combat on a prolonged, sustained basis. In other words, I'm sure you really didn't care if that kid had a 300 PFT, but you did care that he was able to operate for weeks at a time, if necessary, in stifling heat, little food, shitty water, not good sleep patterns, and all of that. So all PT, in my opinion, is aimed at combat endurance, not silk shorts running events in combat. That said, physical training in the rear takes many forms. I'd like to get your thought on just good physical training in the rear. What's the real purpose of it, the payoff in combat? And what's your advice to units that maybe need a little bit of shot in the arm about how to do some things innovative and just make it interesting for the fellas?
Yeah, physical fitness, PT, exercise. That's my wheelhouse. I'm passionate about it even today. In my regular life, I'm just gonna throw some softball pitches out there all over the place. the value of physical training far exceeds just the physical benefit. There's an emotional, a psychological, so a mental and emotional value of benefit that could potentially be greater than any physical benefit. And there's tremendous physical benefit, right? Being fitter, faster, stronger. Keeping your fitness regimen varied, keeping it interesting, keeping your audience captivated by it, exciting. Those are cool tools. I'm a giant CrossFit fan. I came across CrossFit and it was like we were already doing constant varied functional fitness executed at high intensity before we even knew that it was defined that way by Greg Glassman. And, things like the obstacle course and just mixing everything up, keeping it varied, constantly challenging, keeping it realistic, but also not neglecting some of the more traditional stuff, going to the gym. I mean, it's a collection that all has a what's the word? A synergistic effect on mind and body and soul and spirit. And not to mention camaraderie for your men and building tightness and unity. And so I'm going to stop there because it's pretty obvious where that conversation's going, but let's talk about if I were to say you have one thing, if I were to say, hey, anybody out there, hey, all you corporals and future corporals to be listening, pick one thing that you have the most control of to resist any human dimension thrown at you, right? Human factor thrown at you. What would it be? It's not, it's fitness. With an increased physical fitness, I have an ability we're in a massive thunderstorm right now, so it's distracting. You can reduce the effects of stress of heat and cold, fatigue, sleep deprivation, being scared of the dark. With increased fitness comes increased capability, coordination, and that's going to help you in times of uncertainty when you're facing anxiety or fear, you name it, not to mention just the physical capacities, but you can fight you can delay the onset of these human factors with taking ownership of your physical capacity. So why wouldn't you? And it's so easy. And even if it is just sit-ups, push-ups, 3-mile run, it's better than nothing. It's better than eating Cheetos and playing Xbox for 4 hours. Like, just go for a run and do some push-ups and pull-ups, and you're going to benefit from it. Now, and I think that's the basics. And in the Marine Corps specifically, we've come a long way. But, anytime you attribute a score to something and you weight performance for promotion and awards and everything, it comes suspect. I've seen people that say, oh, I've got a 300 PFT, and I'm looking at them, I'm like, no, you don't. Well, watch. And I'm looking like, hey, none of those pull-ups counted. Your chin never went over the bar, And so it's coming down to holding a standard to your CFT, your combat physical test, and your PFT, your physical fitness test. Like, you have to hold standards to the value. Otherwise, the movements and the training have no, a blunted purpose. And so it's back to standards-based training again. And you fight human nature with people wanting to, like, oh, well, I don't want to tell my sergeant that pull-up didn't count. He's going to get mad at me, but it didn't count. But I'm going to let it go. So all you're doing is cheating him out of, physical development. And so I don't know. I don't want to bash because I'm not, but how many 300 PFTers or 285 plus PFTers have you seen? And you're looking at them and you're like, yeah, no way. No way. Or great, you're a 300 PFTer, but I wouldn't want you carrying 80-pound ruck over the hills of San Mateo because you fall out all the time, so you keep your PT varied. And I'm just dorking out about fitness. Bringing it back to your question is, yes, if of all things that you're going to weigh of importance to do, if you have an hour of time, work out, do something, build your physical capacity. The benefits far exceed any type of physical development or adaptation that you're going to have. And those adaptations are exceptionally valuable as well. So,
yeah, I do want to touch upon something that you mentioned, so we can reiterate it. The ultimate litmus test of any peacetime physical training program is the ability for that soldier or Marine to physically perform his mission on a sustained basis and under less than optimal conditions. And you have had the experience, Tosh, of seeing exhausted Marines that haven't slept in a while, and they're not going to sleep for a while. And they are pushing themselves farther and harder than they ever have before. And you can't tell them when they're going to get more chow. You certainly can't tell them when they're going to get a few hours of non-interrupted sleep. So I think what I hear you telling people is mix it up, be innovative, get your folks fit. But at the end of the day, all that really matters is what that person can do with the pack on and maneuvering and firing and closing with the enemy, you know, with the appropriate load and all of that. Any final thoughts on this?
Yes, I agree. But I'm going to trump it up. I'm going to trump that up and say physical fitness makes better human beings. And that might be heresy, that might be challenged by people, but I'm going to stick on it because that's what I believe. I believe working out, being a better physically fit human being makes you a better human being in your soul, in your heart, in your head, in your mind. But yes, you know, at the end of the day, but I mean, you know, all these potential future combat leaders that are missing, they might not even see combat, you know, or they might be in an MOS that's rear echelon supporting frontline troops. And I think the physical fitness conversation is equally important to them as it is a straight legger. And maybe the rigorous demands of each occupational specialty vary, but ultimately we should be. Pat Millay, I can't stop talking enough about Pat. Like, he always used to tell me, PT must be punishing, but never punishment. And I'm like, yeah, boss, I hear you, but I'm going to slay these guys because I know there's value there. And punishment makes us stronger, makes us better, you know? So punishing yourselves physically it's going to make you a better human being. It is, period. And then if you're one of those men or women that find yourself facing combat, yes, is to extend your culminating point.
Yeah.
It's to extend your culminating point beyond any measurable expectation of adversity, and you just continue to thrive, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I want to make sure that someone out there is not taking you literally. I'm sure you don't mean to literally punish folks. You're talking about very challenging physical training that leaves even your most fit guys knowing that they just been through one hell of a session, that they've been challenged. They're tired. I mean, they're pushing, they're going into new territory and they're getting tougher. You know, the old iron versus, you know, iron sharpens iron saying. Yeah,
perfect. And yeah, I mean, there's the super well-known boxing match I did on the Dubuque before we hit port call, you know, and punishment, I don't mean it in a negative sense. It's good, you know, punishing. It's needs to be developmental. It needs to be coming from a place of goodness and thought and well-intention. And you put your men and you hold them to a standard, and you have to realize, like, hey, this person on a scale of 1 to 10, this person's a 7. So you need to introduce them to physical events scaled at an 8. And this individual is a 4, and you need to introduce them to physical events that are at a 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And this one's a 9, so you need to give them a 9 or a 10. You know, let them taste some success, but also give them a marker to continue to reach for and leave them exhausted. And if you can't do that for yourself and push yourself to see where your new margin is and continue to push your margins outward, then you have no business leading. You need to continually challenge yourself in ways that you are going to challenge your men and women. And if you're not willing to challenge yourself like that, then get off the ship and start swimming, because we don't want you.
Yeah. I want to, you brought me to a place here. I want to ask your opinion. I honestly don't know I know you're quite an athlete in the sense of the CrossFit and all that. I don't know what your athletic or sports background is, but you're talking now to the young kids who aren't even in the military yet, and they want to become warriors. They want to do everything they possibly can prior to shipping out to boot camp. Do you find benefit in young people engaging in sports? And in particular, do you think there's any higher value on like individual combat sports, wrestling, boxing, mixed martial arts, and things like that? And it's not a loaded question, Tosh. I honestly don't know your background on this stuff.
Yeah, Mike, I think it's great. And I'm going to dance around it a little bit. And I think it's important to dance around it because of what I want to say. I think there's sports that I would encourage people to lean towards, sports that introduce a sort of interpersonal violence and struggle. I think those are very important, especially when you're going into a combat arms MOS, that interpersonal violence. And I don't necessarily mean it doesn't have to be violence, but like wrestling or jiu-jitsu or boxing, it just does something. And there's a character building assessment involved as well. And I think any sport, though, is exceptional, but less for the physical development and more for the dedication to whatever the development is transferable. The team dynamics. So I would put a preference over team sports, whether it's 2-person, 4-person, 15-person, whatever it is, over individual sports. But I'm not gonna sit there and say, because boxing and wrestling are individual sports, and so there's value for both.
Yeah.
I think any athletic endeavor that you take, whether intramural or some sort of organized sport, or the JV, varsity, whatever system that they have in place, it is important. And it's probably more important for some of the developmental things than it is just for the physical game. We have 8 conversations there. Like, if I could go back and do a sport, I would do gymnastics. And again, I'm focused on the coordination and the body weight manipulation and the strength that it creates. And I just didn't do it. I was a baseball guy, wrestling guy for a couple of years. But I mean, there's no, I don't care if you downhill ski, it's your sport, or play basketball horse or whatever it is. Just do something because it's helping round you out. It's helping round you out as a human being. Is really what it's doing. And I think it's critical. Yeah,
I agree with what you're saying. And, I was a wrestler, 3rd grade all the way through college. I wrestled at the D1 level, at a mediocre level, I might add. But I have seen superb Marines who played no sports, and also superb Marines that did play sports, team sports, individual combat sports. I've also seen some Marines that had incredible athletic backgrounds as a civilian, like high-level champions that were terrible Marines. So the sports part, it all has potential benefits. Like anything else we've talked about, it all has potential benefits. But if we found a certain recipe that, a Marine needs to do A, B, and C, D, and he'll always do great, we'd have that recipe. And if you've seen it, let me know. I've not seen it yet. I don't think it's there yet.
No, I think what you're saying is great. And I don't think we want a recipe. I don't think you do, because then we have a bunch of cookies that taste the same. And that doesn't allow for, picking the right flavor for the right situation. And we want, I want kind of a homogenous force to a degree, but I want to see blips of talent and inspiration that are different. I want to embrace individuals, and I want to treat each individual Marine as an individual, as well as that homogenous force. Like, it's critical to remain, or to encourage that identity growth in everybody. And I mean, it's a leadership principle. Go right to your book. Go right to your guidebook for Marines. Leadership principles. Employ your Marines in accordance with the capabilities and limitations.
Yeah.
And I mean, go for it.
Yeah. Tosh, I saved what I feel may be one of the most important topics for last, toward the end of the interview, and it's on the topic of casualties. I think a question that young non-combat experienced Marines may not know to ask themselves or to think about is, I think they've settled that, people are going to get hurt. I don't know if we do a good job of exposing them. And I'm very dated, by the way, so you may know, you obviously know more, you're more current than me. But I think young soldiers should not be shocked at the sight of what they hear or at sea, what they hear and what they smell. They at least need to be told it's going to happen, told how they're going to feel, and given some options. Hey, you're going to have to keep driving on and all of that. What's been your experience? What do you tell the young troops talking to you and say? I mean, I get it. I'm not going to freeze. I'm going to resort to my training and all that. But when I see a guy to my left and right get hit and torn up pretty badly, what effect is that going to have on me? Any advice for me as just a regular rifleman, and any advice for me as a combat leader?
Yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and there's nothing that you're going to do that's going to prepare you to deal with the weight of that on you. Been through some of the most realistic training you've ever been through. I've been through the actual thing, and it all weighs on you. There's nothing you're going to do that's going to reduce that weight. Everything that you do is going to reduce how you respond to it in the moment. And realistic training and realistic conversations. People are going to die, and it's going to be sad. And I'm not going to refuse anybody their emotions, but let's handle emotions when there's a time to handle emotions. And it's not to say that, hey, now's not the time, but somebody's still going to have emotional response. Hey, you got to deal with that. It's hard. It is exceptionally hard, but I'm not saying I dealt with it the right way. I compartmentalized very well. Different people didn't. They processed in the moment, and who's to say that I'm better or worse today than I am for how I did it for somebody else? That's the nature of it. I look at it super practical, like how many hundreds, if not thousands of people did we kill? The enemy's feeling the same thing. They're human beings, and we're killing them, and we're going to take our casualties. The enemy's going to have a couple wins, as long as that we're dealing the wins on a much different proportion, and that sounds hard, but that's how you have to think. You're a war fighter. You're in the business of killing. Not to think that people are going to get hurt on both sides it doesn't make sense. It's not, it doesn't compute for me. You just have to deal with the casualties, the best training. You look at our casualty rates. Modern day, we have a greater lethality of weapons on both sides of the battle. Maybe not, or maybe, we were in Iraq and Afghanistan. You could say that certain units on the enemy side had greater lethality of weapon systems than maybe previous, and some of them not so much. Their training is really what limited most of them. But our training on combat casualty handling has been, it's phenomenal now. And when I went through boot camp and even basic school, it was just like, tourniquet. In training, you would just throw the tourniquet on a dude, and you would just throw the whatever on a dude, and you would just keep marching, hey, heal yourself. Like, you as a commander have to enforce realistic, but they're not sexy. Nobody wants to practice casualty drills. And it's like, if you practice all of those, you have an ability to mitigate the severity and the severity and the frequency, or not the frequency, but the quantity of the super hard, not able to, people are coming back from wounds in combat today that they would never have survived on the battlefield. And when you can increase the confidence in your men and women on the battlefield that they're going to be taken care of when they get hit, their bravery, their aggression, their everything goes through the roof. It's like, hey, man, like, I'm going to get taken care of. And today you have, I don't know, pick a number. You probably have a 500% greater chance of surviving a wound, a serious wound in combat today than you've had anywhere in history.
Yeah.
And that's good to know. And this needs to be talked about. And that comes from quality training from the lowest all the way up to the highest level of care. When we're in peacetime, the time to practice casualty training isn't when you're in rehearsal stage as you're getting ready to cross the LD or go into your dispersal area. You need to be doing that as a routine.
I want to go a little bit deeper into that. You're saying good stuff there. It's been kind of like fairy dusted for years, the casualty plan and all of that. And I had a speaker on I talked to a couple of weeks ago, and so I'm paraphrasing him. He said precisely what you're saying, just a little bit deeper. I want to get your opinion on this, Tosh. He said that your troops, your PFCs, Lance Corporals, they don't know what the medevac plan is. They're in the assault. It's the officers and staff NCOs and NCOs that got to figure that out and make sure that it's workable, and hopefully they rehearsed it. But the Lance Corporals and below get to evaluate your medevac plan during the first medevac. So if he hasn't been hit, but his buddy has, how he sees his buddy handled, treated, medevac, getting him out during a golden hour is how he's going to get treated, 10 minutes later or 10 hours later or 10 days later. And the unit morale can either go way up because, hey, it's hectic here, but we got the guy out. He's probably going to make it. Or, man, it was just a shit show. They didn't know they had no plan. And because they had no plan, this guy bled out because he was still in the LZ 4 hours later. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, my head's going straight back to a unit thing we used to have. And, we talk about the 5 W's in a mission and the 5 H's, 5 W's in an H or whatever it is. And it's just like, hey, let's just boil it down into, rubber meets the road talk. Hey, where am I going? How am I going to get there? What do you want me to do when I get there? And when I get hurt, how are you going to get me home? And if you can answer those 4 things for your men, you're in. And what are you going to do for me when I get hit? How are you going to get me home? Like that is, if that's not on your list of priorities as a commander to at a minimum instill trust and confidence, to exemplify your love for your men, then you're wrong, And, we rewrote our mission orders to make sure that we had that. And you said it, fairy dusting the medevac plan, the CASEVAC plan. And no way. It's too valuable. It has too much value to the performance of everybody, what you're doing. You need to hammer that home. That home.
Yeah, agreed. Well, our time is rapidly running out here, Tosh. Is there anything off the top of your head that we haven't covered that last saved rounds that you'd like to share with the young fellas here that are listening? Some of whom aren't even alive yet, but they're going to listen to Tosh someday and pick up a kernel of wisdom here and there.
I don't know. I remember, how many times when you were a young devil dog and they'd bring in these old timers to talk and give you all this advice, and it's like, hey, how many old timers just can't let go and they feel like they have to constantly give and tell people how to do it. And it's like, hey, just take what all of us are saying and process it. Don't take it as gospel. Take it as a facet of how to think, what to think about, and internalize it and have conversations so that it makes meaning to you guys in whatever time and era you're in, and try to extrude the threads of commonality through all of the speakers of this Combat Leadership podcast. And don't try to replicate any individual or any individual actions or any specifics that you're hearing. Just use them as examples to draw from. And apply it to your current day, current climate, current situation. And that's what I'd like to share. I'm not afraid of believing and standing up for anything that I'm saying. But take it with a grain of salt. When people are telling me things, one of the things I always research is what's the context? What's the background that this is coming from?
Yeah.
What commonalities do I share with that background, and what things do I not share? And so that you can make all of these messages from all of these speakers have specific value to you, and wish you the best of luck. It's in good hands. The future's in good hands.
Yeah.
As long as you just, it's character. Good.
Yeah.
It all boils down to good, solid character.
Yeah. Tosh, I always ask the fantasy question at the end. If you could bring back one leader from the past, way past or distant future, whatever, I mean, the distant past, the near past, who would you bring back? Who would you spend a day with if you could? And why would you choose that person?
Man, everybody's probably wanting a sexy answer, right? Marcus Aurelius or somebody, or Apollo or whoever, like, and Harriet Tubman.
Yeah.
I'd spend a day with that woman. What she did, you think she wasn't in combat? You don't think she was leading insurgency, and you don't think she was passionate and valued and committed? And I'd love to spend a day with that woman and just learn and understand what made that woman tick to do the things that she did for her fellow, men and women, I just use the term men, and just, I would spend the day with her. I think she's a fascinating human being. And I'm sure I'll tell you who I would default to without don't even have to put a name on it. Ordinary Joe. I would love to spend a time with Ordinary Joe that served at Peleliu or served at Waterloo or served, pick a battle. Average Joe. We all want to surround ourselves with personalities and favorites and celebrities. And I'll tell you what, those people usually come with a lot of baggage, and their perspective has changed with their celebrity status. And so maybe I refine my answer from Harriet Tubman, although I'm going to stick with it. But I'm going to take two. Just give me an Average Joe or Jane.
Yeah.
Spend the day with that individual.
Well, if you read some of the letters written by soldiers from hundreds of years ago, I mean, they're all very poignant, and you can find out what the average Joe's life was like, before, during, and after the battle. As far as Harriet Tubman, you're the first one that's ever said that, but I got to tell you, there was a special operator there if there ever was one,
Yes, there was.
She was running special ops before special ops were invented, so to speak, so that's a unique answer. I appreciate that.
And you think if she was running around today that she'd be on Instagram calling herself Special Forces or whatever? I don't think she'd be interested in any of that.
No, I don't think so, but you look at how many people today are alive because their ancestors were alive because of her efforts. Yep. So she preserved the bloodlines of no small number of Americans now. So, yeah. Well, listen, Tosh, we're at the end here, but before I let you go, I'd like you to tell us all what I know you're involved in various things, businesses. You got some charities going and all of that. Tell us first of all what you're doing, who you're helping, and more important, or as important, how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm all over social media, I suppose. Tempered, obviously, Tosh.crookedbutterfly at Instagram and Crooked Butterfly at Instagram. I'm on there. One's my personal, one's my business account. I run a business called Crooked Butterfly Ranch that tries to, I deal with anybody and everybody, but I screen who I work with. It's just not like hire me or anything. I try to impart leadership and whatever it is that the individual is looking for from my perspective. It could be in the fitness realm, it could be intellectual. I try to provide experiential learning opportunities for people with my business. And it generally revolves around leadership and mental toughness. We recently launched a nonprofit. It's a veterans nonprofit called Big Fish Foundation. And this is a foundation specifically targeted for veterans. It's a prehab to suicide type of mindset. I believe that you need to do certain things for veterans. I'm tired of the suicide narrative. And it's like, hey, we're talking about helping the families after suicide, helping the individual with medication status. Like, hey, long before we even come to that, why aren't we putting into place systems and procedures to soften that or to give outlet? And so we started a nonprofit for that. It supports veteran-owned businesses and veterans, obviously. And it's not a handout. The Big Fish Foundation is not about, I'm in trouble, I'm in need, and then we just give you something. We'll give you information to find somebody else better suited for that. We're not to replace any other organization. We find ourselves trying to fill a nation, the spectrum of services for veterans struggling with with post-traumatic stress or difficulties adjusting to the civilian life, or looking or feel lost with a sense of purpose. But we're focused on helping the ordinary and average veteran, help them rebuild their narrative to take ownership for their life. But they also have to be wanting to and invested in helping themselves. I have a saying: I don't give anybody with their hand to. I don't give anything to anybody with their hands out. I give to people with gloves on. So that's our foundation that I started. We have a great board, and we're just getting underway. In fact, we have our inaugural fundraiser kicking off here at our ranch next week. So it'd be, by the time this airs, it'll have already happened. But it's something that we're looking to do.
Anybody, any ability for people to donate to your organizations via the internet?
There is. You can go to bigfishfoundation.org. There's a donate page where we've applied for our 501c3 status, and we were expecting a favorable determination, but the COVID virus kicked in, so the IRS is delayed. But we'll get that. We have a 24 month to 27 month grace period, but you can make a donation directly there online, and we'll get the links up on both Instagram and Facebook as soon as we get our tax identification number. But I would love your support. Your money goes towards giving veterans who are focused on helping other veterans and focused on helping themselves. We give them opportunities to come to leadership camps, get involved with outward bounds or boundary waters, knolls, hunting opportunities, just things that help feed the soul.
Yeah.
So.
Well, great. Tosh, I can't thank you enough. You really shared, I think we're up to almost 3 hours now of recorded content. So you really, poured your heart out, so to speak, for these young folks. And I know they thank you for that. People still remember who you are. What you say still matters. And I think this is going to go a long way to helping people become better combat warriors, better combat leaders. And you shared a lot of lessons that hopefully are going to save some lives as well. So the only thing I would ask is, would you please come back and do another one someday?
Yeah, I'd love to. I've actually, I've benefited from your questions and reflecting in it. Just thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Tosh, we are rounds complete for this podcast.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at combatleadership.com. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient philosopher Plato. Only the dead have seen the end of war.